I recently discussed one of my favourite bands, Me Without You, and their frontman, Aaron Weiss. And something that further occurred to me was how he saw himself, his own role or position as the frontman of a band. He's said in interviews that in the early days of the group, he hoped that he would have some kind of spiritual mission. He could be some spokesperson for deeper truths about God and the way we should live. He hoped he could have maybe a prophetic role, I suppose. But as time went on and he began to doubt his own authority or himself as a source of some kind of wisdom, in fact, began to doubt whether language can really convey these supposedly transcendent truths at all. He kind of acknowledged that his main role was really to be an entertainer, that he'd be happy if people liked the way he danced on stage, or if people had an interesting interpretation of his lyrics that he hadn't perceived. And this interests me because there are other bands that come to mind that have a strong social message or purpose that I resonate with myself, but their place within the market, within the music market, calls into question how effective they could be, perhaps. And I'm looking at this through the lens of the Marxist philosopher Walter Benjamin's famous essay, The Author as Producer, where he's keen to emphasize that any creator is enmeshed in a particular mode of production, that he's not just a creative genius who, you know, proclaims his message, his artwork to the world, who can recognize this almost spontaneous force of creation. He is, after all, a producer in a commodity market for the kind of artwork that he's making. And that implies a usually often bourgeois audience and the demands that they would make. And Benjamin's asking, well, how does this simply perpetuate certain systems that we live in? If an author becomes more leftist, becomes more critical of capitalism, how is he going to try and change that structure or seek to produce in a different way that will actually make a broader difference rather than simply add his artwork to the pile of commodities perpetuating the current system? And if we apply this to music and the modern music scene, I might take up a band like Gojira, the French metal band that I've become really fond of late, because they're notable for having a strong environmental message. They obviously deeply care about the pollution of the earth and the damage that that's doing to all forms of life. And yet we can see that in many ways their activity as a band is part of that system. The electricity they use for their instruments, for the live shows, in many ways can only participate in the polluting civilization that we are all implicated in. Now, I'm not calling them hypocrites any more than I'm a hypocrite. Although I deeply care about these things, I still drive a car. My family still put our often acrylic containing clothes in the washing machine, putting thousands of microplastic fibres into the water system and so on. But maybe this illustrates the real problem of late capitalism, of the sense that we're in a sort of cage that it's very hard to get out of. And for Gojira, clearly they wouldn't be a success unless they had great music, brutal riffs, incredibly precise instrumentation, and a great live show. That's how they've had the voice and the platform that they have. And this is a problem for other, more left-leaning groups. I'm thinking about Rage Against the Machine or System of a Down. Again, at least one of those bands I really appreciate, but they too have to participate in the systems they're critiquing. I suppose System of a Down's album "Steal This Album" is the ultimate sign of that, in sort of trying to proclaim a message that is free from market forces. Yet, of course, the same security guards in the record shops would protect the album as a purchasable commodity as much as they protect anything by Michael Jackson. For some reason, in many ways, this is probably the appeal of hardcore punk to some. A band like Mind Force, who I really appreciate, who to my English ears sounds something like Metallica fronted by a Beastie Boy. They kind of maintain a less populist presence as part of a scene that celebrates the underground, that seeks to remain outside the mainstream, and so on. And does that give their anti-authoritarian message more weight? I don't know. I'm not going to judge in that matter, but it probably gives them a certain weight for some that they haven't sold out, as some would say Turnstile have, for example. And again, I like Turnstile. I'm not going to bash them or anything, but we can definitely see in the contemporary music scene all these different factors at work, and it remains a question as to how authentic, I suppose, any of these groups can ultimately be, as much as they make great music.